Silence is misunderstood. People think silence means weakness. They think it means fear. They think it means you ran out of words. That belief is why they stay powerless. Because silence is not the absence of power. It is the presence of control. The moment you stop reacting, something breaks inside the other person's mind. Not loudly, quietly. They don't feel calm. They feel exposed. Because now there is nothing to push against. No emotion to grab. No explanation to twist. Only space. And the human mind cannot tolerate empty space. So it fills it with doubt, with paranoia, with fear. This is where psychological warfare begins. Not when you speak. When you don't. Machiavelli understood something most people never will. Power is not loud. Power is composed. The one who speaks first reveals position. The one who explains reveals insecurity. The one who reacts reveals weakness. Silence reveals nothing. And what reveals nothing cannot be attacked. When you go silent, the other person starts talking to themselves. They replay your last words. They reanalyze your tone. They question their own behavior. You are no longer involved, but you are in control. Because silence forces the other person to do the work. They chase meaning. They chase reassurance. They chase closure. And the one who chases has already lost. Silence flips the hierarchy. Before, they had access to you. Now they don't. Before, they could provoke you. Now they can't. Before, they felt secure. Now they feel uncertain. Uncertainty is power. Machiavelli believed fear was more reliable than affection. Silence creates a refined form of fear, not fear of punishment, fear of irrelevance. And nothing terrifies the ego more than being ignored. When you stay silent, people project onto you. They imagine motives. They assume intentions. They invent stories. Some see confidence. Some see manipulation. Some see cruelty. It doesn't matter. All interpretations increase your perceived power. Because ambiguity commands respect. The mind bows to what it cannot read. This is why silence enrages manipulators. They need reaction. They need emotion. They need chaos. Silence denies them all three. It cuts the supply. Now they escalate. They provoke harder. They say things they don't mean. And with every attempt, they expose themselves. Their insecurity, their dependence, their desperation. You say nothing. And that silence speaks louder than any response ever could. It says one thing clearly. You cannot move me. This is not avoidance. Avoidance is fear. This is restraint. Machiavellian restraint. The ability to feel emotion and not obey it. Most people fail here. They break silence too early. They explain. They defend. They justify because being misunderstood feels unbearable to them. But Machiavellian psychology requires something harsher. You must become comfortable being misunderstood. Because the need to be understood is the need to be controlled. Once you stop chasing clarity, you gain leverage. Now they explain themselves to you. They apologize first. They soften, not because you demanded it, but because silence demanded it for you. This is psychological pressure without effort. You are not fighting them. You are letting their mind exhaust itself. Machiavelli believed the greatest victories required no confrontation. Silence creates internal collapse. The unanswered message becomes a weapon. The delayed response becomes dominance. The lack of reaction becomes authority. Silence removes you from the emotional economy. You no longer trade words for approval. You no longer trade reassurance for peace. You stand apart, and people respect what stands apart. Once you master silence, people treat you differently. They hesitate. They calculate. They choose words carefully, because silence creates gravity. Emotion repels. Control attracts. But understand this. Silence is not for the emotionally dependent. If you crave response, silence will torture you. Machiavellian silence requires detachment. You must be willing to let people assume, to let them judge, to let them walk away. Because power is not built on being liked. It is built on being untouchable. Silence is the gateway. When you go silent at the right moment, the game ends without a winner. Because the one who needs the interaction more loses. And silence ensures it is never you. True psychological warfare does not begin with action. It begins with restraint. And restraint mastered long enough becomes domination. Silence does not end when you stop speaking. That is the mistake most people make. They think silence is something you do temporarily. A pause, a reaction. In reality, silence is something you become. Once people realize you do not respond the way they expect, they begin adjusting their behavior around you, not consciously, instinctively, because humans are wired to seek feedback, and silence denies feedback. When feedback disappears, anxiety appears. They start asking themselves questions they never had to ask before. Did I say something wrong? Did I cross a line? Did I lose influence? Silence forces self-evaluation, and self-evaluation weakens position. Machiavelli understood that people are easiest to control when they are uncertain of their standing. Certainty creates confidence. Uncertainty creates obedience. Silence creates uncertainty. When you consistently respond less than expected, people lower their emotional posture around you. They soften their tone. They explain more. They justify their actions. Not because you demanded it, but because silence demanded it for you. This is how silence becomes social control. You are no longer reacting to the environment. The environment reacts to you. People begin reading into everything you do. A delayed response feels intentional. A short reply feels meaningful. A neutral expression feels calculated. And once people believe your actions are deliberate, they treat you as powerful. Because power is assumed before it is proven. Silence trains people to assume. Machiavelli warned that familiarity breeds contempt. Silence creates distance. Distance creates mystery. Mystery creates respect. This is why emotionally expressive people are rarely respected long-term. They are predictable. They are readable. They are exposed. Silence seals you. Now let's talk about pressure. Silence applies pressure without confrontation. In conversation, the one who speaks more is negotiating downward. They are trying to be accepted, understood, approved. Silence does the opposite. It raises the psychological cost of engagement. People begin to feel like they must earn your words, and anything that must be earned is valued. This is not kindness. This is hierarchy. Silence places you higher in the structure. Not because you said so, but because others felt it. Machiavelli believed true control is invisible. If people can see the strings, the illusion breaks. Silence hides the strings. People obey without realizing why. They overthink before speaking to you. They hesitate before challenging you. They seek confirmation in your reactions. And when there is little reaction, they assume authority. This is why silence intimidates confident people too. Confidence relies on feedback. Remove feedback and even confidence destabilizes. Now understand this. Silence is not emotional withdrawal. Emotional withdrawal is weakness. Silence is emotional neutrality. And neutrality is unreadable. The unreadable cannot be manipulated. Manipulation requires access. Silence denies access. Machiavelli advised rulers to appear calm even when chaos surrounded them. Calmness signals control. Silence is calm amplified. It tells the world you are not rushed, not pressured, not reactive, because manipulators do not tolerate uncertainty. They need to know where they stand. Silence denies that information, so they increase pressure. They say something provocative. They accuse, they imply, not because they are angry, but because they are probing. They want reaction. Reaction confirms access. Silence denies access. This is where most people fail. They break silence to defend themselves, to clarify, to correct the narrative. That's exactly what the manipulator wants. Because the moment you explain, you step onto their frame. Machiavelli warned against fighting on terrain chosen by others. Silence refuses terrain. Now the manipulator must choose, escalate further and risk exposure, or retreat and lose control. Either way, they lose leverage. Silence forces manipulators to reveal intent. They overreach. They contradict themselves. They show desperation. Because manipulation without feedback feels like shouting into a void. And voids terrify control-driven minds. The longer you stay silent, the more their behavior becomes visible. Not to you, to everyone else. Silence turns manipulators into performers. They start talking too much, explaining too much, justifying too much, and the one who justifies is already on the defensive. Machiavellian psychology thrives here. You do not accuse. You do not confront. You observe. Silence creates a spotlight. And manipulators hate spotlights. They depend on confusion, on private narratives, on emotional fog. Silence clears the fog. Now their words echo. People begin noticing patterns, contradictions, tone shifts. Not because you expose them, because silence let them expose themselves. This is psychological judo. You use their momentum against them. Now understand something critical. Manipulators will attempt to reframe your silence. They will call it immaturity, coldness, arrogance, avoidance. This is not for others. This is for you. They are trying to provoke shame. Shame is a tool. If you feel ashamed, you respond. If you respond, they regain access. Machiavelli advised rulers to ignore insults that do not threaten position. Silence ignores insult because insult is bait, and bait only works if taken. The manipulator's greatest fear is being irrelevant. Silence implies irrelevance, so they intensify. They may attempt to force a reaction publicly. They may involve others. They may exaggerate. This is where silence becomes surgical. You do not stay silent forever. You choose a moment, one response. Minimal, controlled, not emotional, not defensive. Just enough to reset hierarchy. A statement, not an explanation. And then silence again. This creates psychological whiplash. The manipulator cannot predict you, and unpredictability breaks control. Machiavelli valued unpredictability above force, because force can be resisted. Uncertainty cannot. Silence makes your behavior unreadable. Manipulators rely on patterns. Once patterns disappear, manipulation collapses. Now something important. Silence is not meant to dominate everyone. Only those who seek to dominate you. With neutral people, silence is calm. With manipulators, silence is threat. They feel it instinctively because they know the rules. They know silence means you are not playing, and a game without players ends. The manipulator must either adapt or disengage. Most disengage, because control lost is rarely regained. Silence does not humiliate them, it starves them. And starvation is worse than confrontation. This is why Machiavellian silence is ethical within its logic. You are not attacking, you are not deceiving. You are simply unavailable. And unavailability is power. When silence becomes your default response to manipulation, something permanent changes. You stop attracting manipulators. They sense boundaries they cannot breach. They choose easier targets. And that is real victory, not dominance. Deterrence. Machiavelli believed the best ruler was one rarely challenged. Silence creates that reputation. People learn. This person does not react. This person does not chase. This person does not explain. So they hesitate, and hesitation is respect. Silence used correctly ends games before they begin. No drama, no conflict, no exposure, just quiet control. And in psychological warfare, the one who controls quietly controls completely. Silence becomes dangerous when emotion is involved, because emotion makes people careless. In romantic and emotional dynamics, silence is rarely interpreted as neutrality. It is interpreted as judgment. Machiavelli advised rulers to set terms early. Silence sets terms without negotiation. Now, the darkest truth, in emotional dynamics, silence makes you unforgettable, because the mind remembers unresolved experiences more vividly. Closure fades memory. Silence preserves it. This is why people think about those who never explained themselves, not because they were special, because the story never ended. Silence leaves the door open psychologically, not for reunion, for rumination. And rumination creates attachment. This is not romantic. This is cognitive. The mind loops unfinished business. Silence creates unfinished business. Now understand responsibility. Silence is power, and power misused becomes destruction. Machiavelli warned that fear must never turn into hatred. Silence used to humiliate breeds resentment. Silence used to maintain self-respect breeds attraction. The intention matters. If your silence is rooted in self-control, it elevates you. If it is rooted in punishment, it exposes insecurity. People feel the difference. Silence that feels calm creates gravity. Silence that feels hostile creates distance. A Machiavellian chooses gravity. They allow others to come closer on their own terms. Now observe the final shift. When silence becomes your natural state, relationships stabilize. Drama fades, arguments shorten, emotional manipulation weakens, because silence removes fuel. People either adapt or leave. Both outcomes increase your position. Machiavelli believed loss was acceptable if it preserved power. Silence filters. Those who respect boundaries remain. Those who need control disappear, and what remains is clean, controlled, silent. In emotional warfare, the one who can remain composed always outlasts the one who reacts. And silence is the highest form of composure. It does not beg. It does not threaten. It does not explain. It simply waits. And waiting, when backed by inner control, becomes dominance. Silence reaches its final form when it no longer feels intentional. When you are not holding back words, you simply do not need them. At this stage, silence is no longer something you use. It is something others feel. Your presence changes rooms without effort. Conversations slow when you enter. People become more precise, not because you demand it, because they sense control. Machiavelli understood that the highest level of power is effortless authority. Authority that does not argue, does not persuade, does not explain. Silence creates that authority. When you stop needing to be heard, people start listening. This is the paradox. Most people talk to exist. You exist without talking. And that difference is felt immediately. Silence reshapes your identity. You stop reacting to provocations. You stop correcting misconceptions. You stop defending your character because you realize something crucial. Your reputation is not built by explanation. It is built by consistency. Silence protects consistency. Words fluctuate. Emotion leaks. Silence remains stable. Stability signals power. Machiavelli believed rulers should be predictable in values, but unpredictable in behavior. Silence allows both. People know where you stand. They never know how you will respond. That combination creates respect mixed with caution, and caution is healthy. Silence removes you from emotional chaos. You no longer argue to win. You no longer speak to be validated. You no longer engage to feel relevant. Relevance comes to you because silence creates gravity. People move toward gravity. Now notice what disappears. You stop being dragged into drama. You stop being pulled into sides. You stop being consumed by other people's emotions because silence sets a boundary that words never could. A boundary without negotiation. Machiavelli valued boundaries that did not require enforcement. Silence enforces itself. Once people know you will not engage emotionally, they adjust. They either rise to your level or remove themselves. Both outcomes strengthen your position. Silence refines your circle. Only those who respect restraint remain close. Everyone else fades. This is not loneliness. This is filtration. Power always filters. Now the deepest shift. Silence makes you internally unshakable. Because when you stop expressing every thought, you stop feeding every emotion. Emotion weakens when not expressed impulsively. Silence trains emotional discipline, and emotional discipline is rare. Rare traits create value. You begin choosing words with intention. When you speak, it lands. Because people are conditioned to pay attention. They know you don't waste language. Machiavelli wrote that a prince should speak little, but when he does, be remembered. Silence ensures memorability. Now understand the final danger. Silence without self-awareness becomes arrogance. True Machiavellian silence is grounded. You are silent not because you believe you are superior, but because you are secure. Security does not announce itself. It waits. Silence that comes from security feels calm. Silence that comes from ego feels hostile. Others can sense the difference instantly. The goal is calm. Calm is intimidating because calm implies control under pressure. Silence trains calm. At this stage, people stop trying to test you. They already know the outcome. No reaction, no escalation, no chaos, just composure. Silence becomes your reputation. They describe you as composed, hard to read, grounded, intense. These are not compliments. They are acknowledgments of power. Power no longer seeks approval. It attracts alignment. Machiavelli believed that the strongest position is the one that requires the least maintenance. Silence requires nothing. No explanations, no defenses, no emotional upkeep, just presence. And presence when silent dominates. This is the end of psychological warfare. Not because conflict disappears, but because you are no longer available to it. Silence has moved from strategy to system to identity. And once silence becomes identity, power becomes permanent. Silence does not announce victory. It leaves no applause, no proof, no explanation. And that is why it works. By the time people realize what changed, the hierarchy is already set. They speak differently around you. They hesitate before challenging you. They think before acting. Not because you demanded respect, because silence trained them to give it. Machiavelli never believed power should be visible. Visible power invites resistance. Invisible power invites obedience. Silence is invisible power. It does not threaten. It does not persuade. It does not chase. It simply removes itself from chaos. And chaos collapses without fuel. This is the final truth most people never accept. You do not win psychological warfare by overpowering others. You win by outlasting their need for reaction. The loud exhaust themselves. The emotional reveal themselves. The manipulative expose themselves. And the silent remain. Silence does not rush outcomes. It waits for inevitability. Because people always show who they are when they are uncomfortable. Silence makes them uncomfortable. Not violently, not cruelly, quietly. And in that quiet, everything surfaces. Intent, fear, dependence, weakness. You see clearly because you are not speaking. You move precisely because you are not reacting. This is why silence feels heavy to others. They sense that you are no longer playing the same game. You are no longer seeking approval, no longer chasing clarity, no longer negotiating your worth. You have stepped outside the emotional marketplace, and anything outside the market gains value. Silence is not emptiness. It is restraint sharpened into presence. It is confidence without display, power without performance, authority without argument. When you finally speak, it is not to explain, it is to decide. And decisions reshape reality. This is where the journey ends. Not with domination, not with revenge, not with control over others, but with control over yourself. Because the person who controls themselves no longer needs to control anyone else. Silence gave you that. And once you understand it, you will never rush to fill space again. You will let others talk, let others reveal, let others struggle against the quiet, while you remain still, watching, waiting, untouched. That is not weakness. That is the final form of power. Most people will leave now, not because they disagree, but because this level of awareness is uncomfortable. Staying requires discipline. Leaving is easier. And that choice says more than you think. This channel is not built for everyone. It's built for those who notice patterns, who listen between words, who understand that power is quiet. Subscribing is not support, it's alignment. It means you recognize something here that most people miss. Something unspoken, something useful. No reminders, no noise, no emotional bait, only clarity. If this changed how you see silence, control, or yourself, you already know what to do. And if it didn't, you won't be back anyway. That's how this works. Thanks for watching. Subscribe this channel, please.